you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. It's very good afternoon. Okay, we were discussing on time of supply. So we were in the time of supply provisions, wherein we discussed in detail what is the time of supply for goods. So what we could recollect from our previous discussion, time of supply for goods, it says that if you receive any advance for supply of goods, that is not to be considered because of notification number 66. The time of supply for goods will be not on the advance basis, it is always on the issue of invoice basis. So whenever you raise the invoice, you have to pay the GST and not on advance in case of goods. But in case of services, it is different. So under goods, we learned various things. We understood what is the time of supply for continuous supply of goods, what is the time of supply in case of reverse charge, what is the time of supply of goods in case of issue of vouchers, right? So we have understood that in detail. Now we'll go to supply, uh, what happens in case of time of supply of services. 30 days and 45 days and a quarter, right? So this also we have understood that if you raise the invoice within time, then it is issue of invoice or receipt of payment. But if you raise the invoice after the statutory time limit, the statutory time limit is 30 days. If you raise the invoice after that, then the time of supply is receipt of payment or provision of service, whichever is earlier. Now, in both these cases, one thing is common, which is receipt of payment. So in case of receipt of payment, what do we have to do? We have to see when is the payment received. Okay. Now, to determine the actual date of payment, the provision says that it could be payment in the books of accounts, payment in the books of accounts, or payment which is credited in the bank, whichever is earlier. Right? Why is this relevant? It is relevant because, say, the year end, somebody has made payment to you by a check. Okay. So when they make a payment to you by check, payment made by check. Now, they have made the payment to you on 30th March 2024. This is the date of check. Okay. Now, this will get cleared in your bank 30th, 31st, generally there is a bank audit. So it will get cleared on the 2nd of April 2024. Okay. So what is the actual receipt of payment for this example? Invoice date is not known and also the provision of service. Yeah, that is fine, Hardik. We are assuming we are only looking this from a limited perspective to determine what will be the date of payment in this case, wherein, okay, other things are there, but how do you determine the receipt of payment? That is the question. Since it is credited on 2nd April, many are being the 2nd of April, but the actual receipt of payment according to the provision and what is being depicted here also, receipt of payment is payment in the books of accounts or payment credited in the bank, whichever is earlier. So now in this case, since the date of check is 30th March, and if you have accounted as receipt, correct? Because once you receipt, the general accounting principle is once you have your check in the hand, you can account it as a receipt. So you account as receipt on the 30th March itself, unless he has issued a check from outside the state and it has reached you late. That's a secondary case. But in this case, he has handed over the check to you on the 30th March itself. So you have accounted the receipt also on 30th March. So the receipt of payment will be payment in the books of accounts, which is 30th March, and the amount will get credited later on. So in your bank, that's why if you see the bank, there is something called as when you record the balance as per bank account in your books of account, that statement, that balance and the balance in the bank statement, there'll be a difference. That is why we prepare something called as a bank reconciliation statement, wherein checks have been received but not yet cleared. That will be a reconciliation item. But once you have the check in hand, you can account it. So once you have recorded in your books of accounts, that is also sufficient. Whichever is earlier. Yes, Rati Malini, it is whichever is earlier. Okay. Now let's take another example. Same date of check is 30th March. Okay. Cleared in the bank on 2nd of April. Now it is got cleared in my bank account. But what has happened is I have not accounted in my books on time because uh, I had deposited it, but I forgot recording it in my books of accounts. So I have accounted it on this should be a border case, but okay, let's keep this. Say I have accounted it on 5th of April 2024. Now, in this case, what will be the receipt of payment? It will be 2nd of April itself because it is earliest of the two. What is payment which is credited in the bank or payment in the books of accounts, whichever is earlier. Okay. So it is 2nd of April. Correct. Everybody is given a correct answer because say if you forget, but there is a credit in your bank account, right? So you cannot deny that. So it is treated as receipt in the bank or payment in the books of account, whichever is earlier. Now let's take a full scale example. We'll take all the details together. Provision of service is completed on 1st of April 2024. Okay. Raised invoice on 31st March 2024. Receipt in bank is on 30th of March 2024 and accounted in books is on 31st March 2024. What is the time of supply in this case? Sania, yes. I've taken an example on advance also. So some people are saying 30th March, some people are saying 31st March. So first is we have to see whether invoice was raised. Yes, invoice was raised on 30th, 31st March. Provision of service was happened on the 1st of April. Even though provision of services happened on the 1st of April, I have raised the invoice in advance. 30 days of the provision of service or before that also. So I can raise it before also. So I've raised it before, which is on 31st of March itself. That is the date of invoice, and receipt of payment will be earliest of the two. Payment in the books or payment credited in the bank. So I have received it in my bank account on 30th March and I've accounted on 31st March. So earliest of the two, 30th March. So now I have to compare between 30th March and 31st March, which is earliest. 30th March is the earliest. The time of supply is 30th March itself. Okay. Very simple example. Now let's take an example where provision of service is on 1st of April. I have raised invoice on the 1st of May. I have received in my bank account, okay, on the 31st of May, and I have accounted in the books. Okay, I have accounted on the books on a timely basis, which is 30th of April. Now, in this case, what is the time of supply? Okay. Lot of questions. Few are saying 30th April, few are saying 1st of April, 1st of May. Okay, lot of confusion. Again, when is the receipt in the books of accounts? When it is accounted in the books or receipt, whichever is earlier. So it is 30th of April, right? Now I have to raise the invoice within 30 days, which is 1st April. I have to raise it by the 30th of April, but I have raised it on 1st of May. So there is a delay. So this provision will not apply. What provision will apply to me then? So this scenario will not apply. Correct? This will not apply. What will apply? Receipt of payment or provision of service, whichever is earlier. Now, provision of services happened on the 1st of April, and here, which was the earlier date, 30th of April. So the time of supply will be 1st of April itself then. Correct? I will change the color, Komal. Okay. So accounted. So earliest will be 1st of April. Okay. Now let's take another last scenario wherein provision of service. I have provided the service on 15th of April, and I have raised the invoice on 13th of May. I have received the payment in my books on the 16th of April, and I have accounted in my books on 18th of April. So in this case, what is the time of supply? 15th April, 16th April, 13th. No, luckily no. 15th April, 16th April. Somebody is saying 18th April, all possible dates. But understand again, very simple. Receipt, have you raised the invoice on time? 15th April, within 30 days, you have to raise the invoice, which is when does the 30 days get over? April, Jan, Feb, March, April. April has 30 days, right? So 15 plus 30 makes it as 14th April, you have to raise. 14th May. By 14th May, you have to raise. So you have raised the invoice on time, correct? So the invoice date will be relevant. So you have to take the invoice date, which is 13th May, or payment, whichever is earlier. So you have to take 13th May, okay? Or receipt of payment, whichever is earlier, which is 16th April. So you have to consider a comparison between 13th May and 16th April. 16th April is the earliest one. So time of supply is 16th April. Oh my God. Why is there so much of confusion? Why? Simple, right? So time of supply is 16th April 2024. Advanced scenario, yes, this okay. This is was close to advanced scenario. How Komal? Komal, can you unmute and ask your question so that we can save time, please?
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon.
Sir, actually, you said provision of services or payment in the books or payment credited in the bank, whichever is earlier will be the time of supply.
Correct.
So here the provision of service is 15th April, but
No. See, what you have to see is you have to do a comparison. That's why this chart is there, wherein if you see, it says if you have raised the invoice on time, okay? If you have raised the invoice within 30 days, then it is issue of invoice or receipt of payment, okay? In this case, you have issued the invoice on time.
yes,
Then it is issue of invoice or receipt of these two, whichever is earlier.
yes, understood, sir.
But if you raise the invoice late, then it is provision of service or receipt of payment, whichever is earlier.
Sorry, sir, you're correct.
Okay. Let's take one last scenario where I have provided the service on 5th of April and I have raised the invoice on 30th of April. I have received in my bank, I have received advance. Okay. So let me advance received for rupees 20,000 on say 31st March 2024. And provision of service was for 1 lakh rupees, raise invoice also for 1 lakh. Now receipt in bank for 80,000 rupees. Now this is received on 30th May 2024 and I have accounted in the books on 30th of June 2024. So in this case, what's the time of supply? And provision of service, definitely it is 1 lakh rupees. Raised invoice also for 1 lakh rupees. Invoice can be raised in advance. Invoice can be raised in advance. Yes, it can. Provision is not silent on part payment, Abhishek. Provision is not silent. We are silent on it. I will tell you what is the scenario in case of part payment. Supply like this is the provision. The exceptions, what it says. The exception one on 1,000 rupees that we understood with the telecommunication example. But in terms of other exception, it says that supply is deemed to have been made to the extent of invoice or value of payment. So what I'm saying is the second exception says that supply is deemed to have been made to the extent of invoice or value of payment. So for advance, you will not raise an invoice. So to the extent of advance received, time of supply is triggering. So supply is deemed to have been made to the extent of the value of payment you have received. So 20,000 received, time of supply is considered to, so to the extent of 20,000, it is deemed that you have made a supply. So what does it mean? You will have two time of supply. For 20,000 rupees, you will have one time of supply. And for the balance 80,000 rupees, you will have a different time of supply. So you have to, wherever you're receiving advance, that is important that you have to determine the time of supply for advance separately and for the balance separately. So what is the answer? Shruti, you have to also tell the amount. One is date and the amount. Nancy Hingu, time of supply cannot be one date. Here you will have two time of supply. Okay. Preeti, you have made an attempt. Bhaskar Das, only one date. Kasak, okay. Hardik, okay. Shruti also give an answer. Okay. So the time of supply for advance received. We have received the advance before. So receipt of payment or issue of invoice, whichever is earlier. So to the extent of 20,000 rupees, it is 31st March, right? To the extent of 80,000 rupees, have I raised the invoice on time? Yes, I have raised the invoice on time. So the time of supply for the balance 80 will be 5th of April because 5th of April is earlier than these two dates. So to the extent of 20,000 rupees, 31st March, and to the extent of 80,000 rupees, invoice raised on 30th April. So 30th April will be the date for the balance 80,000 rupees. Correct. 31st March, 20,000 and 80,000 rupees, 30th April. Sir, accounted in books is need to check in any case, or is it just to confuse us? It has to be checked. It has to be checked, Shruti Kumari, because that gives us a comparison. Had this receipt been in April, then you would have compared, right? So you have to see receipt in bank or accounted in books, whichever is earlier. Compare that with the provision of service or issue of invoice. If invoice is not raised on time, then we know, no? If invoice is not raised on time, then Kasak, the time of supply will be provision of service or receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Yeah, if advance received, say in this case, it is 1000 rupees. Okay. Then there you have an exception where receipt of an amount up to rupees 1000 in excess. If the advance is 1000 rupees, then the time of supply can be advance or issue of invoice, whichever is optional. Okay, so it is, if you want to pay tax on advance, you can pay on 1000 rupees, and on the balance value, you can pay it at the time of raising the invoice, or at the time of receipt of that advance, you don't have to pay anything because it's below 1000 rupees. But at the time of issue of invoice, time of supply will be triggered even for the 1000 rupees. So for advance, we have checked the payment date and invoice date. No, same things. Only advance means it is an advance. So you will just take that date of advance, which is 31st March in this case. Okay. Okay. Now let's proceed further. Time limit for issuance of invoice. So while studying section 12 mentioned they're presently irrelevant for the purpose of payment of tax. What is the meaning of this? Which aspect, Riddhi? Mentioned in section 12. So what I mentioned was that time of supply for goods. That case I mentioned that where it is a supply of goods, their receipt of payment is not relevant. That's why we didn't study that there. So we are reading it now in case of issue of invoice for supply of services. Okay. So now rule 47. Rule 47 says that any insurance company, a banking company, or financial institutions, including a NBFC or a telecom operator, or any other class of supplier making taxable supply of services between distinct persons as specified in section 25. Okay, making taxable supply of services between distinct persons as specified in section 25 may issue the invoice before or at the time such supplier records the books of accounts or before the expiry of the quarter during which the supply was made. Which means what? If these case of companies, that is insurance company, banking company, a financial institution, which can include a NBFC or a telecom operator. So four types of businesses: insurance, banking company, financial institution, or telecom operator. And in financial institution, NBFC is also covered. So majorly four category of businesses: insurance, banking company, financial institution, or a telecom operator. These people, when they are making any supply, okay, then any kind of transactions between one entity to another entity which is registered, related party transactions, for which you have to raise an invoice, they can issue the invoice before or at the time such supplier records the books, or before the expiry of a quarter, saying that okay, if you do not raise it on a monthly basis, we will not trigger the time of supply, but you have to raise it at least on a quarterly basis, which means that at least on a quarterly basis you need to raise it before the expiry of the quarter during which supply was made. You have to raise the invoice. Before that itself you have raised, then that will be the time of supply. Why? Because between related parties, they may not raise the invoice. So to counter away such situations, saying that invoice is not raised on time, for such practices, such industries, the you may raise the invoice before or at the time when the supply is recorded. If such invoice is not raised, at least on a quarterly basis, you have to consider it. That is what it says in case of these specific institutions. That is time limit for issuance of invoice. अनुराग, इसमें क्या बोल रहे हैं कि अगर आप इंश्योरेंस कंपनी है, आप एक बैंकिंग इंस्टीट्यूशन है, आप एक बैंकिंग कंपनी है, फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन है, या फिर टेलीकम्युनिकेशन कंपनी है, और आपके ब्रांचेस बहुत सारे रहते हैं, तो अगर आप एक ब्रांच से दूसरे ब्रांच में कुछ भी सर्विस प्रोवाइड करते हैं, तो हर एक सर्विस तो आप ऐसे ही प्रोवाइड करोगे, क्योंकि इंश्योरेंस कंपनी है तो फिर एक ब्रांच से दूसरे ब्रांच बहुत सारे काम आते रहते हैं। तो उन्होंने कहा कि आपको हर महीने महीने बैठ के इनवॉइस बनाने की जरूरत नहीं है। अगर आपका सिस्टम बनाता है तो अच्छी बात है। अगर सिस्टम इनवॉइस रेज नहीं करता और आपको पता नहीं चलता कि मंथली मंथली क्या करना है, तो आप, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, आप मंथली मंथली इनवॉइस रेज मत कीजिए, लेकिन क्वार्टर में वंस इन 3 मंथ्स एटलीस्ट आप इनवॉइस रेज कीजिए, ये बताता है ये प्रोविजन। ओके, मूविंग फॉरवर्ड. In case of continuous supply of services, we had seen what is the time of supply for continuous supply of goods, but for continuous supply of services, the time of supply will be where the due date is ascertainable from the contract, then invoice shall be issued on or before the due date of payment, or where the due date is not ascertainable from the contract. Agar contract में you have ascertained that this is the due date for this thing, it is clearly defined, then the invoice shall be issued on or before the due date of such payment. If the such due date of payment is not ascertainable, then the invoice shall be issued before or at the time when the supplier of services receives the payment. Determined तो नहीं है, लेकिन उसको payment मिल रहा है. At the time of payment, practically before that, you have to raise the invoice. Then third scenario is where the payment is linked to the completion of an event. इवेंट बेस्ड पेमेंट्स जैसे हमने बात किया था, कंस्ट्रक्शन कंपनी, ईच फ्लोर वाइज व्हेन इट हैपेंस, आई विल रेज अ इनवॉइस टू माय कस्टमर. So this is linked to an event. So once the event comes in, I have to raise the invoice. Clear? So time of supply of invoice, issuance of invoice in case of continuous supply of goods was once you have a determined contract where you are deciding you will issue a statement or receipt of payment, whichever is relevant. Here also, whichever is relevant itself, because where the due date is ascertainable from the contract, then invoice should be raised before that. Where the due date is not ascertainable from the contract, then the invoice should be issued before or at the time when the supplier of service receives the payment. Okay. And in third scenario, where the payment is linked to the completion of an event, then the invoice shall be issued on or before the date of that completion of that event. So payment, event, or again, second scenario also payment. So payment, and event. Simple. 31(6) says where the supply of services ceases under contract. जब आपका contract खत्म हो जाता है, then this says that where the supply of services ceases under a contract before the completion of the supply, then the invoice shall be issued at the time when the supply ceases, and such invoice shall be issued to the extent of supply made before such cessation. क्योंकि generally क्या होता है, invoice has to be issued within 30 days of the provision of service. Correct? So you have time till 30 days in normal scenarios. But when you are seizing the service, आपका contract close हो रहा है customer के साथ, then you don't have to raise it after 30 days, because once the contract is closed, you will have to raise the invoice and close the transaction. Correct? So that's why they're saying that when the event is closed, where the service has been seized, then the time of supply will be, invoice should be issued at the time of when the supply ceases, and invoice is issued to the extent of such extent. Okay. So when the invoice shall be issued at the time when the supply ceases, and invoice shall be issued to the extent of the supply made before such cessation. Now, in case of reverse charge, you have to pay when? You have to pay at the earliest of the following: date of payment as it is recorded in the books of accounts of the recipient, or the date on which payment is debited in the bank account. Again, same how we had date of receipt of data credit, whichever is earlier. Similarly, here also date of payment or date on which payment is debited from your bank account, or the date immediately following 60 days from the date of issue of invoice. Okay. Which means what? When you do a comparison between RCM for goods and RCM for services, you will see RCM for goods is receipt of goods or date of payment or 30 days from the issue of invoice. And if not, then the date of recording the supply. And in case of RCM for services, it will be the earliest of receipt of services, that there is no physical receipt. So we don't have a comparison over here. So first condition is not there. Second condition is date of payment continues. And in case of goods, it was 30 days from the date of issue of invoice. In case of services, it is 60 days from the date of issue of invoice. Okay. So that is the time under reverse charge for services. And if no, then date of recording the supply. So RCM for goods and RCM for services. RCM for goods, 3 conditions. RCM for services, only 2 conditions. And in case of associated enterprises, that is the last part. In case of associate enterprises where the supplier is located outside India, right? When is that case possible? That is here, which says that in case of supply by associated enterprises. What is an associated enterprises? Divya, what days are 45? In case of cessation of supply, invoice should be issued before cessation. Yes, when you are just ceasing off, when you are closing off the contracts, just before that you have to raise an invoice. You don't have to wait for 30 days. Ki service is completed now, I will raise after 30 days. Because in case of cessation, you may not contact the customer. That's why they said at the time of cessation itself, whatever is the invoice, you should raise it that point of time. Yes. Having at least 20% shareholding, but less than 50%. Why less than 50%? Because if it is more than 50%, it is a holding subsidiary company. So holding subsidiary are also associate, correct? So anybody who are holding more than 20% is called as associate enterprises. Now, when you have any associate enterprises outside India, okay, in case of associate enterprises where the supplier of service is located outside India, the time of supply will be date of entry in the books of accounts of the recipient of supply or the date of payment, whichever is earlier. Which means what? Simple, that in case of an associate enterprises also, like how we had discussed in case of telecommunication, banking and insurance companies, here also invoice may not be raised on a timely basis, but entry will be there in the books of accounts. So in case of such associate enterprises, provided that the supplier is located outside India. If he's located inside India, then you don't worry. Okay. That we know what should we do, that locally will do it. But what they're saying is in case of import of services by a entity which has a associate entity outside India, the time of supply will be not the issue of invoice. It will be date of entry in the books of accounts or the date of payment, whichever is earlier. So only in case of associate enterprises where one leg is outside India, one of the associated is outside India, and he is providing services to India, the time of supply will be date of entry in the books of accounts or the date of payment, whichever is earlier. Got it. In case of an associate enterprises, you have to be very careful. Otherwise, everything is fine. So that is what we are repeating here, that in case of an associate enterprises where the supplier is located outside India, the date of recording payment in recipient books or date of payment is the relevant date. Which means what? A supplier of service from associate enterprises located outside India, then the time of supply will be, but both of them has to be associate enterprises. Just normal is different. But in case of associate enterprises, date of entry in the books of accounts, which is the accounts of the recipient, or date of payment for the service, whichever is earlier, date of payment will be date of entry of service in the books of accounts of the recipient, either bank account or accounted in the books of accounts, whichever is earlier, that will be treated as the tax on reverse charge, because import of service is all under reverse charge. So you will be liable under reverse charge basis. Date of payment always includes one date of receipt, one date of debit, and I am correct. No, Riddhi, not clear with your question. Would you want to unmute and ask your question? Any more doubts here? Okay. So one thing important here is associate enterprises itself कि जब भी आप books of accounts में enter कर देते हो, then that is the date as which will be relevant for time of supply. That is the time of supply for goods, time of supply for services. So, as a matter of revision, the provision relating to time of supply of goods under forward charge normal will be date of issue of invoice or date of recording the payment, whichever is earlier, but no GST at the time of receipt now. So, GST will be paid only on the date of issue of invoice or the due date when you have to issue the invoice. If invoice is not issued late, by the due date by when you have to issue the invoice, that is the time of supply. Again, let's understand this. Let's finish this and then take example. Time of supply of goods under reverse charge will be date of receipt of goods or date of recording the payment or the date on which payment is debited from the bank account or 31 days from the supplier's invoice, whichever is earlier. So multiple charts have gone. Here they have mentioned all of this, whichever is earlier. And in case of time of supply of vouchers, which are exchangeable for goods, the date of issue of invoice will be the date of issue of voucher if the supply is identifiable. If it is not identifiable, then the date of redemption. Associate enterprise transactions under RCM. Not all associate enterprises, sir. In that scenario, Sanya, it is that where the associate enterprises is outside India and you are in India, so then it will attract reverse charge, right? So because import of services are all under reverse charge. So if a associate enterprises is outside India, there is a different company than the Indian company. Just because you are associated, you cannot say that both of you are one and the same. So any transaction between you is not taxable. No, right? You cannot say so. So any kind of a associate enterprises where the supplier is outside India is only liable for reverse charge. Okay. Now we were talking about a scenario for time of supply for goods. Okay. Sale of goods happened on 1st of August 2024. Okay. And invoice raised on forgotten to raise invoice on the 1st of August, on 31st March 2025. When the audit will happen, that time they've raised the invoice. They have forgotten. Okay. And amount received. When is this amount received? This amount is received on 1st of October 24. This is for goods, okay? Sale of goods, of course. So sale of goods is on 1st August, invoice is raised on 31st March, and amount is received on 1st of April. What is the time of supply in this case? Correct. So it is on 1st of August, because in case of sale of goods, you have to raise the invoice before selling the goods, which is by 1st August, you should have raised it. Now you have not raised on 1st August, but the invoice is raised on 31st March. So will we go back to 31st March and say that is the time of supply? No. Our time of supply will be when the invoice is issued or by the due date when it has to be issued. So the due date when it has to be issued is then the date when I'm sold the goods. On 1st August, I should have raised. So 1st August is my time of supply. Amount received in advance, not received. Technical issues, all of that doesn't matter. So amount received will not be relevant then, because in case of supply of goods, sale of goods is relevant. Since the sale of goods happened on 1st August, that is the time of supply. Okay. Next thing what we learned is relating time of supply of services. It is the date of issue of invoice or date of recording payment in the books of supplier, or date on which payment is credited to the bank, whichever is earlier. Here it is all there, no exception. In case of time of supply of service and a forward charge, when invoice is not issued within time, then see, very important here. Here it is when invoice is issued within this time, that is 30 and 45 days. And here when the invoice is not issued on time, then the date of provision of service or receipt of invoice, whichever is earlier. So when they say provision of services or date of receipt, whichever is earlier, so we'll go back to the date of provision of service. And we will disregard the date of invoice. Why? Because they have issued the invoice late, whichever is earlier. In the above events, if the above events are unascertainable, then the time of supply will be date of receipt of the services in the books of account of the recipient of supply. And time of supply of services under reverse charge will be date of recording or date of payment, or 61 days from the supplier's invoice, whichever is earlier. And time of supply of voucher will be where the same In case of goods, what we had, when the issue of voucher is identifiable, then the date of redemption of the voucher. Okay. In case of residue cases, if the above does not work, then the time of supply will be where the periodic returns is filed, then the date on which such periodic return is filed. And when you are not filing periodic return, in addition in value by way of interest, late fees or penalty for delayed payment of consideration, time of supply will be the date on which the supplier received such additional payment. When the supplier receives such additional value, that is the time of supply. That is on cash basis. Now, few FCQs. This we had covered, this we had done. This one. Question number 3. May, provision of service. Invoice is raised on 28th June, right? Which is within time. And payment is received after that. So issue of invoice or receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Issue of invoice, which is 28th June. What chart, Manoj? Preeti Kumari, are you convinced now? It is 28th of June itself. Why 29th May, Komal? 28th June. Fine. Which of the following is the time of supply in case of supply of services where the reverse charge mechanism is applicable? Kasak, your doubt, just keep it. After this question, we'll go back to the previous question. For answer is date of payment or date immediately following 60 days from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier. Date of payment or date immediately following days in case of supply of services. not D. Answer is C. Why D is being asked? Yes, time of supply chart we have to remember. Only few, right? So we will have to remember that. Correct. So invoice is raised after 30 days. So it is late. So time of supply will be provision of service or receipt of payment, whichever is earlier, which is 12th of Jan. Okay. Kasak, what was your question? Seems to be very interesting question. Can you please ask? That will be helpful. I did ask to unmute. See, are you able to unmute now? Okay. Probably some problem with the mic. No worries. Tell me what is your question with respect to question number 3. Thirty days from May, Jan, from March, April, May is 27 June. Correct. So it become 27 June. So time of supply will be actually provision of service or receipt of payment. So it will become 29th May. Correct. So everybody said 28th June. I also said a wrong answer. Can you just relook at your answers? May, right? 30 days from May is not 28th June. It is 27th June. So the option 27th June is not 29th May. Yeah, it is given, right? So the correct answer should be 29th May in my view also. हाँ माही आपने 29th ही बोला था. I missed it out. So 29th May है इसका आंसर because 30 days from 29th May is 27th June. थर्ड वन का ऑप्शन है बी. ऑप्शन है ये. Okay. So that brings a end to the chapter of time of supply. So this is Children's Day today. So do you think you should be given holiday, or third answer is A? Yes, third answer is A, Naya. No. So what we'll do is we will now go to the next chapter. Since we have ample time, we will not like to waste our time. Time of supply is completed. Now we'll go to value of supply. Yes, Sanya, with respect to ham model, there is a clarification. Yes, we can do that. Correct, Preeti. Of course, we will study. No holiday for us. Yes, we are there, but still we have to study it. I will share with you the ham project clarification. Okay, just share my screen. Wherein there is a circular which just tries to clarify that what happens in case of time of supply of specific projects. So these are all practical cases wherein some difficulties would have been paid, there by some on the ground thing. That's where this clarification is coming. It says that clarification on time of supply in respect of supply of services of construction of road and maintenance thereof of national highway projects of the National Highway Authority of India in hybrid annuity mode model. So there are various models where the National Highway Authority of India gives contracts to the contractors, and the model they come up with various models. One of the model is hybrid annuity mode model. So what happens in this model? They have first tried to explain it. Under the hybrid annuity mode model of National Highways Authorities of India, the concessioner has to construct the new road. You call it as constructor or a contractor. In the highway project, they are called as concessioner. The concessioner has to construct the new road and provide operation and maintenance of same. So he will construct the road and he will also do the operation and maintenance of the road. Okay, that is the contract, because it is that you will have to construct the road and you have to get a revenue by the toll collection. So that's why you will construct it and operate it and maintain it for which will generally be for a long period of 15 to 17 years. And the payment of the same is also spread over the years. So in that case, what is the time of supply for the purpose of payment of tax is the question. So the government is clarifying that, or the CBEC is clarifying that under the hybrid annuity model of concession agreements, the highway development projects are under design, build, operate, and transfer model, wherein the concessioner is required to undertake new construction of the highway as well as operation and management. And after that period is completed, then he will transfer the maintenance part to the NHAI itself. They will do the maintenance. Now, the payment terms for the construction portion as well as the operations and management portion of the contract are provided in the agreement itself. That the payment terms are provided saying that, okay, we will make the payment spread over the duration of the contract. A HAM contract is a single contract for construction as well as for operation and maintenance. So it is a consolidated contract where you will do the construction also under the contract and do the operation and maintenance also. The payment terms are so staggered that the concessioner is held accountable for the repairs and maintenance of the highway as well. The contract needs to be looked at holistically based on the service to be performed by the concessioner and cannot be artificially split into two separate contracts. You have to look at the whole contract together because they are not floating two contracts. They're giving you only one contract for all inclusive for the construction first and then the maintenance and operation. So you're not splitting up into two contracts. The concessioner is bound contractually to complete not only the construction but also operate and maintain. In HAM contract, the payment is made spread over the contract period in installments, and payment for each installment is to be made after specified period or on completion of events. So it is covered like a continuous supply of service. So this is a classic example of continuous supply of service where in the case of continuous supply of service, what should be the minimum term? Can it be for 1 year minimum? Or should it be for 5 years? Should it be a 3 years? Or should it be for minimum 3 months? Minimum 3 months period, correct? That is the definition of continuous supply of services. But in this case, the contract is generally for years together, wherein under one contract, based on some milestone, payment is received. So this is a classical example of continuous supply of services. And we know what is the time of supply for continuous of supply of services at the time of completion of event or payment. It is clarified that the tax liability on the concessioner under the HAM contract, including on the construction portion, would arise at the time of issuance of invoice or receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. If the invoice is issued on or before the specified date or the date of completion of the event as applicable. If invoices are not issued before the specified date of the completion of the event, then tax liability would arise on the date of provision of said service. That is the due date of payment or the date of receipt, whichever is earlier. So it is clarified that the installment or annuity payment which the NHI makes to the concessioner also includes some interest component. The amount of such interest component shall be included in the taxable value and shall be added to the value. So in this contract, the confusion was that what will become the time of supply, because you're giving the contract to me now, but payment you're doing later. So should it be the first day itself? Not possible because the contractor is not getting the full value for him to pay the tax. So he's getting it in installments. And in case of continuous supply of service, we have said where the periodic payment is determined in the contract, then the time of supply will be before that periodic payment is received, you have to raise an invoice. So in such scenario, when the periodic payment is received, that is the time when we will raise the invoice. Clear? Any doubts in this or any similar example? Because once we understand this definitely is important for your exam perspective. But to understand continuous supply of service also, it is important to discuss here. Who will issue the invoice here? The concessioner. Because what is happening? The National Highway Authority is giving you a contract, which means that they are giving you a benefit saying that, okay, you give me tender. So basically, it'd be a tender thing. You give a tender and I will give the project to you. What is the benefit for the government? That they're getting their work done by somebody else, for which they have to pay the consideration, they have to pay the charges. And once they give the charges, so the concessioner has to raise an invoice. How will he get money for his services? So he will buy the road, he will buy the stones, he will buy the various other products, and he will lay down the this thing, the road, correct? So for that, he will raise the invoice. So concessionaire is the one who will raise the invoice. ओके, तो इसको फिर से समझने के लिए सिंपल थिंग है कि आप जब जाते हो हाईवे पे, देन यू विल सी दैट बहुत सारे कंस्ट्रक्शन चलती है। कंस्ट्रक्शन के बाहर बोर्ड भी डाला गया जाता है कि कौन कंस्ट्रक्ट कर रहा है। ठीक है, जब नया कुछ हाईवे बनाना होता है तब गवर्नमेंट एक टेंडर कोटेशन करती है, टेंडर ओपन करती है। हुएवर इज द लोएस्ट बिडर या फिर वेल नोन बिडर, उसको अवार्ड दिया जाता है, सेइंग दैट ओके यू कैन कंस्ट्रक्ट। तो फर्स्ट क्या होता है, उसके साथ एक कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एंटर करते हैं कि कौन से मॉडल पे हम कितना पे करेंगे आप। सो इन दैट केस क्या होगा, दे विल गिव अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, और कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करने पे द सप्लायर को इनवॉइस रेज करना पड़ता है। नाउ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में बोला है कि आपका काम कितना हुआ है, ऑन दैट माइलस्टोन बेसिस आप हमसे पेमेंट कर सकते हैं, आप हम आपको पेमेंट करेंगे। तो फर्स्ट कंस्ट्रक्शन के ड्यूरेशन में क्या बोलते हैं कि फर्स्ट 2 साल कंस्ट्रक्शन के लिए लगेगा। तो फिर 2 साल का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में रहा जाता है कि आपका रोड 10% हो गया तो 10% पेमेंट, नेक्स्ट 1 मंथ में 20% हो गया तो कितना रोड कंस्ट्रक्ट हुआ, उस बेसिस पे जो इंजीनियर है सर्टिफाई करके पेमेंट करेगा। तो फॉर दैट कंस्ट्रक्शन टाइम ऑफ सप्लाई विल बी वंस दैट माइलस्टोन इज डिफाइंड। उसके बाद जो मेंटेनेंस का है, बिकॉज इट इज अ हैम प्रोजेक्ट विच मीन्स पहले कंस्ट्रक्ट करो फिर उसको मेंटेन करो। तो मेंटेनेंस के लिए वो तो रेगुलर मेंटेन करेंगे, उसके लिए भी इंस्पेक्शन करेंगे, और इंस्पेक्शन होने के बाद उनके साथ अग्रीमेंट हो जाएगा कि मंथली मंथली पेमेंट होगा। तो जब मंथली मंथली पेमेंट डिसाइड कर दिया गया है, तो फिर टाइम ऑफ सप्लाई विल बी मंथली बेसिस। सो दैट इज व्हाट इज बीइंग सेड हियर इन दिस सर्कुलर, कि जब पेमेंट डिसाइड हो गया है, देन टाइम ऑफ सप्लाई इज दैट पेमेंट बेसिस, और आपको इनवॉइस और पेमेंट रिसीव करने से पहले रेज करना पड़ेगा। Praveen, your question is with respect to time of supply for the 29th May. 29th May, we will not add it, sir. We will take it from 30th May. 30th May to which day you will take? Okay. Praveen, just think over this question. We will again discuss this. How do you see what are the number of days we will consider? Yes, Pallavi, in this case, the time of supply is the date on which payment is received. Correct. That is what is being said here in this detailed circular. Okay. So before getting into value of supply, we'll take a value of supply, then we'll take a break. So better we'll take a break here for 10 minutes. We'll then catch up and start with value of supply. So we can continue. Okay. So we'll be now discussing on value of supply. Now, time of supply is giving you the time when you have to make the payment. Now, value of supply will tell you on what value you have to pay the tax. Like how we had discussed that taxes are here, we will discuss that taxes can be ad valorem or specific duty, which means if you see under customs, you will know that the duty is ad valorem and special duty also, which means that in case of certain goods, it will be just 1 minute. Yeah. So it could be on the value of the goods, some percentage that is called as ad valorem. And when it is specific duty, it means that if it is on a particular machinery, like central excise was on cigarettes, it was not on the what is the value of cigarettes you will sell it at. It was on the length of the cigarette. That is called as specific duty. When it is not pegged to a value, but it is pegged to something like machineries, some tobacco machineries is not based on how much value you produce. It is based on the capacity of the machinery. So the such things are called as specific duty levy. So duty could be ad valorem or specific duty. In GST, most of the valuation is on ad valorem basis, which means at what value you supply on that GST is a percentage. Specific duty is only on some tobacco products, but otherwise on all it is at ad valorem basis. Now, why value is important? Because GST is levied under Section 9 and it says that on the value as may be determined. If you recollect our discussion in Section 9, we said that GST is on supply of goods at goods or services or both at a value as may be determined under Section 15. That is, as may be determined means as determined under Section 15 and at specific rates. So the value is given in under Section 15. Maximum 20%, correct. So maximum 20 plus 20, maximum 40% can be the GST rate on any date. Except you have this cess also, concessional cess. Okay, compensation cess, which will be added up for few goods, but otherwise the basic GST rate will be at 20 plus 20. Correct, Pallavi. Now, some definitions before we get into the value definition relevant before we get into the valuation rule. What is the definition of an agent? Agent means a factor, a agent. No, no, Pallavi. Cess is not applicable on every value of supply. Cess is applicable only on certain commodities, firstly, like aerated drinks, luxury cars, and certain specific products itself. Cess is also applicable on the value, but only on those specific goods. But yes, that is also not a tax on tax. It is on the basic value itself. Okay. Agent means a factor, a broker, a commission agent, a arhartia, a del credar agent, auctioneer, mercantile agent. So these are the various names for an agent. He could be any of those. Agent could be any of those. Each of that is specific to the trade, what is being carried out. Like in case of a buying of a house, you'll call him as a broker. When you use him for a business, you call him as a commission agent or a arhartia, or a person who is helping in sell the goods at the auction is called an auctioneer. So various names. So the to remember this, say in an exam, if they ask you for definition, you can use this acronym called ABCDFM, where A stands for Arhartia or auctioneer, B is for broker, C for Del Credar commission agent, D for Del Credar agent, FM is factor, and M for mercantile agent. So ABCDFM agent could be any of them. who carries on the business of supply of goods or services on behalf of another. So जो भी agent है, he does the transactions on behalf of the other is a agent. Arhartiya means a person, he is also a broker, that he does the transaction with the seller and gets back to you. He is also one type of a agent itself. Factor means who does the factoring, who does the sourcing, buying of the goods on your behalf. He is a factor. Then, what is the definition of consideration? We have seen this before also. Consideration means payment in money or otherwise for the supply. Matlab, consideration is not only money. It can be other than money also. Any payment which we make in money or otherwise for the supply, and monetary value of any act or forbearance for the supply by the recipient or any other person, which means payment can be made by the recipient or any other person, and deposit to be considered as payment. Okay, deposit generally is not a consideration, but deposit will be considered as a payment when only when the supplier applies such deposit as consideration for the said supply. Where the supplier is applying such consideration, such deposit as consideration for the said supply, then it is consideration, which means we know this example. I have given a deposit, I have defaulted in payment, then the supplier is using that deposit against the supply what is made, then it is a consideration, not otherwise. Because deposit is generally returnable, that's why it's called a deposit. Otherwise, it will be treated as advance. Okay. Now, what is money? Money could be anything. So it's not only hard cash, it includes check, foreign currency, promissory notes, Indian legal tender, definitely cash is cash only. Apart from that, foreign currency, check, promissory note, bill of exchange, letter of credit. This definition you don't have to remember because they will not ask you what is the definition of money. There could be a FAQ or a MCQ, sorry, MCQ, which could tell that, okay, is this covered under money? So you may have to remember this, but not kind of mug it up so that you can reproduce it. But just remember this, that money includes an Indian legal tender, a foreign currency, a check, promissory note, a bill of exchange, a letter of credit, a demand draft. It could be any kind of draft, post order draft, demand draft, pay order, traveler's check, money order, postal or electricity remittance, or any other instrument which is recognized by the RBI. And they say any other recognized instrument means that tomorrow, if the RBI said this digital cash, digital currency is also recognized. So that is recognized by the RBI. So that is also money. So any instrument which is recognized by the RBI is money. When used as a consideration to settle an obligation or exchange with Indian legal tender of another denomination. So when any of these things is used as a consideration to settle an obligation, that is, you have to pay somebody and you are doing any of these things, any of it is a money itself, but it excludes currency which is held for its numismatic value, which means any coin, any note which you are not using it for the purpose of the value what is mentioned, but for some unique character. Okay, like some notes will have unique serial number. So because of that unique serial number, which is of its significant numismatic value, you are holding it. So then that is not money because you are not exchanging 100 rupees note for 100 rupees. You are exchanging this 100 rupees note for a wealth value worth 1000 rupees or more than that. Correct. So it is having its value not because of the value what is embedded in it, what is the value which is given by the RBI, but because of its uniqueness. That's why it is not a money then. So it is a traded goods then. Old coins also, yes, antique old coins, even that is not a money. Then related persons, we know this definition of related persons. Yes, e-rupee I have covered, Preeti, that where RBI is recognized, e-rupee is also considered as money itself. Related person, who is a related person? Such persons are officers or directors of one another. When two officers are directors of one another's business, and such two peoples, when we say related peoples, minimum two people are there. So then they say refer to such persons, they refer to any two peoples. Now those two persons are officers or directors of one another's business. Such persons are legally recognized partners in the business. Such persons are employer and employee of the company. Any person directly or indirectly owns or controls how much percent? More than 25% or more of the outstanding voting shares or stocks of them, both of them. One of them directly or indirectly controls the other, and both of them are directly or indirectly controlled by a third person. These are all self-explanatory and nothing much to explain, because all of this we have seen under Income Tax Act, we have seen under Companies Act also, more or less similar definition. And together they directly or indirectly control a third person, or they are members of the same family. These are the seven things. And eighth one is, one of them is a sole agent, sole distributor, or sole concessionaire of the other. So these are the 8 category of persons who are treated as related persons. This is holding and subsidiary and associates. You can say so, but it is more, right? Because apart from holding and subsidiary, they say when you are being held by somebody else, okay, both of them are directly or indirectly controlled by a third person. So generally, under the definition of the Companies Act, they are not associate. But under GST, they are associate because they are directly or indirectly controlled by the other. And when two people are controlling some other person, they are not generally associated, but here it is covered. Okay, co-subsidiaries, more than associates also are covered here. Those who can influence the operating and financial decisions are of the, they are called as related party. Yes. What is outstanding voting stocks? Which means that what is the shares which you have issued? That is called as outstanding voting stock, which means that which is a equity, which is the equity issued share capital, that is called as outstanding voting stock. एथ सोल एजेंट, सोल एजेंट का मतलब है कि आप सेल कर रहे हो तंबेश्वरी आपके प्रोडक्ट्स, लेकिन आप सिर्फ एक एजेंट के थ्रू सेल कर रहे हो। मतलब आप तो डायरेक्टली सेल कर ही नहीं रहे हो, आपने साउथ के लिए एक सोल एजेंट बना दिया है, ईस्ट के लिए एक सोल एजेंट बना दिया, मतलब लोकेशन वाइज आपने सोल एजेंट बना दिया, आप उसके थ्रू ही सेल करते हो। तब वो जो सोल एजेंट है वो आपके पूरे बिजनेस का कंट्रोल करता है, क्योंकि अगर वो नहीं रहेगा तो फिर वो एरिया का सेल कौन करेगा? सो ही इज द ओनली सोल एजेंट। तो वो आपके बिजनेस को इन्फ्लुएंस करता है, तो इसीलिए आपका और उसका रिलेशनशिप भी रिलेटेड पर्सन हो जाएगा। नाउ वैल्यू ऑफ सप्लाई सेक्शन 15 में डायरेक्टली जाते हैं। वी हैव अंडरस्टूड द डेफिनेशंस जो समझना था बेसिक्स। नाउ लेट्स गो टू सेक्शन 15 स्ट्रेट अवे। सेक्शन 15 क्या बोलता है? वेरी सिंपल टर्म्स, इट सेज दैट what is the value of a taxable supply is a transaction value, which means what is the price I sell to my customer, that is the transaction value, which is the price actually paid or payable for the supply. Okay. So whatever price I charge you, that is the transaction value. There are only two conditions for this. Condition is they should not be, they are not related parties, not related party, and price should be the sole consideration. Okay, इतनी पूरी drawing है मेरी. So only two conditions. One is they are not related parties, and price should be the sole consideration. With these two conditions, whatever price you charge, it is acceptable. So the value of taxable supply under GST is so very open that if you just satisfy two conditions, that you are selling to a third person who is not related, who is related, we saw the definition. Uske alawa, if you sell to anybody, it is a not related party. So where you are selling to a not related party and your consideration from the other person is not any love and affection, it is only the price. Uske alawa, you will not get anything. So only in these two cases, transaction value is acceptable. ठीक है? तो इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? We have to understand it with a example. What are we trying to understand? We are understanding transaction value is when Mr. A is sells watch. Okay, he is a dealer of watch. He is selling watch. He is selling to Mr. Amitabh at 5,000 rupees. He is selling to Mr. Sunil at 6,000 rupees. And he is selling to Mr. Ajay at simplistically 7,000 rupees. So in this case, what will be the transaction value for the purpose of GST? So this is determination of transaction value. We are determining what is the transaction value. Mr. A is selling watch to Amitabh Bachchan at Amitabh, I didn't say Bachchan, Amitabh at 5,000, Mr. Sunil at 6,000, and Mr. Ajay at 7,000 rupees. So three persons he has sold to at three different prices. So according to you, what is the GST transaction value in this case? Sole consideration means one price? No. Sole consideration, very important. Sole consideration does not mean one price. Sole consideration means for that transaction, only price is the consideration, nothing else. Okay. Apart from price, there is nothing which you deserve from him or you don't expect from him. That is called as sole consideration, that only the price he will pay, nothing else. Correct. Everybody is given a correct answer. So you already know this chapter very well. If they are not related, then all the values are value of supply. Very good. So for the purpose of GST, this is unrelated party. And of course, everybody is given a disclaimer that, sir, if in your situations, you have not mentioned if it's a related party or what is the price. If the transaction is between two unrelated parties and price is the consideration for what I am selling to Amitabh, then the GST transaction value is 5,000 for him. For Mr. Sunil, it is 6,000. And for Mr. Ajay, it is 7,000, which means whatever price I charge, that is the transaction value. In each case, different price, which means 5, 6, and 7. समझे माही कि ऐसा नहीं होगा कि मैं किसी को 6 में बेच रहा हूं तो मुझे सबको 6 में ही बेचना है. मेरी सेलिंग पावर और कस्टमर की बार्गेनिंग पावर, वो जब मीट होगी तब मैं बेचूंगा. गवर्नमेंट को कुछ लेना देना नहीं है कि आप लॉस में बेचो या प्रॉफिट में बेचो. अल्टीमेटली क्या होगा, जीएसटी गवर्नमेंट को जाना चाहिए. और कैसे होगा, वो चेन चला जाएगा. बिकॉज अगर वो रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन है तो फिर उसको क्रेडिट भी मिलेगा. अगर अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन है तो वो बेयर करेगा. अगर रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन है तो फिर उसको क्रेडिट मिलेगा और फिर वो उसको यूज करेगा ना. तो इसलिए मुझे ट्रांजैक्शन वैल्यू में ज्यादा दखल अंदाजी नहीं करनी है, ये गवर्नमेंट का कहना है. सो वॉट एवर वैल्यू यू चार्ज, इफ यू आर अनरिलेटेड and price is the sole consideration, I will accept the transaction value is what GST is saying. Okay. Then 16.15.1 says, okay, transaction value accept कर लिया. अब 15.2 बोलता है that you have to include something in the transaction value. What you should include? You should include few things, which is duties and taxes and other than GST. If charged separately, each of this we will take it in detail. Now we'll understand section 15 at a macro level. Then we'll go to the micro 15.1, 15.2, 15.3. 15.2 says that duties and other taxes, which is duties and taxes other than GST, if it is charged separately. If any duties are charged separately other than GST, please add that to the transaction value. हो गया, ट्रांजैक्शन वैल्यू आपने डिटरमाइन कर लिया, लेकिन ये कंपल्सरली इंक्लूजन करने हैं, क्योंकि आप जब अनरिलेटेड पार्टी से ट्रांजैक्शन करते हो तब दी सिचुएशन में कम अप. दैट्स व्हाई 15.2 is saying that boss, apart from your transaction value, include this. That is, any taxes and duties which you are charging other than GST, any payment which is incurred by the recipient for which supplier is liable to pay. I have to make the payment to my customer, to my vendor, but instead of me paying it, the customer has paid it. तो मेरे प्राइस में मैं कम कर दूंगा, तो फिर GST रेवेन्यू कम हो जाएगा ना. Again, let's understand this with the example. My sale value is 1 lakh rupees. Okay. Now, customer has paid to the raw material supplier. He's saying, I will only buy the products because I don't trust you. So your value is 1 lakh. Now I have paid to your supplier so that he will deliver the goods to you. I have paid him 20,000 rupees. तो फिर आप ऑब्वियसली क्या करोगे, आपके इनवॉइस में क्या बताओगे आप, व्हाट विल बी योर इनवॉइस वैल्यू? $80,000, बिकॉज आपको तो सिर्फ 80,000 आना है. Out of the sale value of 1 lakh, 20,000 is already kind of paid to you by paying to the raw material supplier. So you will raise invoice in normal terms at 80,000 rupees. तो फिर GST कितना होगा on 80,000 at 18%? 14,400. Correct? But agar he would not have paid this 20,000 to your vendor, then your invoice would have been 1 lakh rupees. और GST कितना होगा? 18,000. करेक्ट. तो गवर्नमेंट को यहाँ पे 18,000 रेवेन्यू जाना चाहिए, वहां पे 14,400 जा रहा है. सो इजंट इट अ लॉस फॉर द गवर्नमेंट कि दे आर गेटिंग लेस वैल्यू? दैट्स द रीजन दे आर सेइंग दैट when you have this transaction where you are raising the invoice for 80, please add payment which is incurred by the recipient for which supplier is liable to pay. So you please include 20,000 and make it as 1 lakh. And that's why you will charge GST at not at 14,400, 18,000. Okay, correct. Invoice value should be 1 lakh. Another 20,000 is what you will add. What is another 20,000? जो 80,000 आपने invoice हमने सोचा था प्रीति, that will not be the invoice. The invoice value will be 80,000 plus what is paid to the vendor by my customer. So all such adjustments has to be happening. How GST is 14,400? It's simple, right? On 80,000, 18% is how much? 14,400. Clear? So this is a such things are compulsory inclusion. So payment, anything which is incurred by the recipient for which supplier is liable to pay has to be added. Rates will be given to the question. Don't worry. GST rate is not to be not as part of your syllabus. So GST rates will be given in your questions. If they don't give, you can make assumptions. That is the normal rate. What is GST normal rate in case of services? 18%. So you can calculate that since the rate is not given, we are considering that for such services, the GST rate is 18%. Correct. 9% plus 9%. 9% CGST, 9% SGST. You are right, Vinod. So instead of mentioning CGST separately, SGST separately, for our understanding, I've mentioned both put together. But you are right. When you do a detailed working in your exam, mention CGST of 7,500 and SGST of 7,200 and SGST of 7,200. Clear? So that is the second exclusion. Third exclusion is any incidental or incidental expenses incurred by the supplier at the time of supply or before delivery. So when I supply goods to you for 1 lakh rupees, now to transport that, I said you come and take the goods. You said no, you only transport it. Okay, I will transport it. Additional transportation charges of 5,000 rupees. So this 5,000 has to be added in the transaction value. SNAK, this is reimbursement, so not to be included. Any incidental expenses which is charged by the supplier at the time of supply or before delivery is to be included. So 5,000 rupees delivery charges has to be added to that 1 lakh. So on 1 lakh 5,000 rupees, I have to charge GST. Fine. Any incidental expenses charged by the supplier at the time of supply or before delivery is another inclusion. Fourth inclusion is any interest, late fees, penalty or on delayed consideration. IPL, same thing. So for IPL also is included in the transaction value, which you don't know at the time of invoice, which you will get to know later on. So you will add it through a debit note. And any price linked subsidy other than by government. This I will explain you in detail when you go to that slide, but understand that price linked subsidy, which is given by any private party other than government, is to be added. But if it is given by government, then we will not add. Okay? 5 inclusions. Duties and taxes other than GST. Payment incurred by the recipient on behalf of the supplier. Incidental expenses. Fourth is IPL. And fifth is price linked subsidy. These are the 5 inclusions. Then there are certain exclusions, very important, which is discount. So all discounts has to be excluded. 5 inclusions and there is only 1 exclusion, which is discount. Now, what type of discount we will exclude, that we will see it. One question here, is this in this supply, then we can do it in interstate also, then what may be the effect IGST is charged? Preeti, not clear with your question? Okay. So this is 15 in a nutshell. Now we'll break this 15 into part by part for our understanding. So if third case, what if customer is not reimbursing the expense? Incidental expenses. So that is a contractual term between you and customer. We have said that incidental expenses, we will charge for the supply, right? If he's not paying, then still It is a value for the purpose of transaction value, because say you had agreed at a customer for 1 lakh rupees. Now, after you supply, if he says 80,000 rupees, then what will you do? Your value is 1 lakh itself. Now, customer is not paying to you. That is your relationship with the customer, right? Similarly, reimbursement of expenses and things like that. When the customer is in agreement, only then you will charge. If he's not in agreement, you will not charge it, right? Similarly, that way. So for some time debtors pay delayed interest, we have to take that as inclusive of GST, and to pay GST under RCM on that interest. No RCM, sir. It is on forward charge itself. You are charging interest and you are paying GST. The customer is not paying GST on that. The supplier itself is charging and he himself is paying GST to the government. Fifteen one says that when the transaction is between two persons which are not related and price is the sole consideration, when these two conditions, 15.1 tab said that when the transaction is between two unrelated person and price is the sole consideration, then value of supply is the transaction value, which is price actually paid or payable. When they say price actually paid or payable, what does it mean? Correct. It has been paid or it will be paid in the future. Due or receipt, credit sales. Correct. Correct. So when we sell something, we raise an invoice. It can get paid later on or it can be paid instantly. So if it is paid later on also, the value of supply is decided when you make the supply itself. Correct? So the value of supply will be the transaction value. That is the price which is paid for the transaction, which is paid now or payable in the future is still considered as valid. So transaction value is that whole value which is paid now and which is paid in the future. That is transaction value. That is 15.1. Now we will talk about adjustment to the transaction value, saying, okay, 15.1 satisfied, you are not related, but some compulsory adjustments has to be done. What is that? All this blue is additions and all this orange is deletions. What is this additions? It says that any other taxes other than GST has to be added. Any payment made to third party has to be added. Any incidental expenses like packing charges, alteration, transportation charges, testing charges, lab charges, what I incurred because customer wants to know the quality control. So he's saying that whatever product you're selling, you have to do the testing and give it to me. So I will charge that testing also on the customer. Any interest, late fees or penalty, and any price linked subsidies other than subsidies given by the central government and state government has to get added. So what are we trying to say? Was simple things. First is any taxes, duties, cess, fees, and charges levied under any law for the time being in force. Take this example. I am supplying rental property. Now on rental property, I'm giving commercial rental, right? A office is being set up. Now I'm giving it for commercial purposes. I'm registered under GST. I will charge GST. Now I say that, sir, monthly, yearly, this municipal tax is there. I will not bear that municipal tax. You have to bear it. So I will add it in my invoice as municipal taxes and charge it to my tenant. So on that municipal taxes, should I charge GST or no? Correct, Sai Kiran, sir. Post sale discount, only credit note has to be issued. To be disallowed, what do you mean by disallowed in case of GST? Rent 1 lakh rupees. GST at 18%, to be more specific, CGST at 9,000 rupees, SGST of 9,000 rupees is what I will charge. Now this is month 1. In month 2, because municipal taxes I don't have to pay monthly, I have to pay on a year end. So in that year end invoice, I have got the municipal taxes. I've told you, sir, municipal taxes you have to pay me. So municipal taxes of 15,000 rupees. So what should be my CGST and what will be my SGST? Pallavi, you're saying we have to pay. Yes, sir, it will be added in GST and disallowed by IT Act. Disallowed by IT Act. If it is an income, how will it be disallowed? We will consider on the total amount of invoice or not on property tax separately. Yes. So you decide and tell me what is the total amount of invoice according to you. CGST will be 1,15,000 into 9%, which is 10,350. Correct. 10,350 CGST and 10,350 SGST. That is the meaning of the first inclusion. Clear here? Okay. Now, I am, with this we understood. Let us keep this example aside. Now we'll go to the next example. I am seller of scrap. Okay. I am selling scrap for 1 lakh rupees. When I'm selling scrap, there is an income tax provision called I have to collect TCS. Okay. So I'm collecting TCS of 2%, 2,000 rupees. Now, in this scenario, what is the same? Consider scrap also at 18% for our easy reference. CGST should be how much? SDST should be how much? Somebody is saying 8,820. How do you get 8,820? Oh, TCS you're deducting. This is not TDS. Okay. In case of your thing, please don't get confused with TDS and TCS. I am not teaching income tax over here. I hope you know what is TDS and TCS, right? TDS is where you deduct it. TCS is when you collect it. So your value, your base value will not be that you will deduct 2000. You will collect it. This is TCS, Baba. You will add the TCS and TDS you deduct it. So you're not deducting, you're adding it. Okay. So now you tell me what will be the GST. Will it be on 1,02,000 rupees at 9%, 9% each? No. That is where this circular is coming here and saying that कि बाबा आप क्या करो, TCS under income tax is not includable as it is an interim levy not having the characteristic of a tax. So it's saying that TCS under income tax is not to be included as it is an interim levy which is not having the characteristics of a tax. So when you say other taxes has to be added, we said that okay, income tax is separate, so we will add it. No, you will still charge 1 lakh into 9%, which is 9,000 CGST, 9,000 SGST, 2,000 rupees for the purpose of GST you should not add. That is what this circular is clarifying. So other taxes you will add, but on TCS you will not add. Clear? So first is adding all of those taxes. TDS, so TDS also you will not do anything, sir, because TDS you don't deduct it. It's the other party who will deduct it. So when you raise an invoice for 1 lakh, your GST will be on 1 lakh itself. TDS is deducted by the other party, and that is a credit which comes to your income tax credit. So there's no impact of TDS also. No, no Sanya and Dilip. TDS also is not included. Second inclusion is any amount that the supplier is liable to pay in relation to such supply, but which has been incurred by the recipient, which is incurred by the recipient of the supply and not included in the price actually paid or payable. Like how we had given that example that the customer has paid for my raw materials. A typical example is when I do a construction, cement is very costly and the quality of the cement has to be retained. So I will tell my contractor, I will give you a building contract, do the whole building, but cement I will buy and give you because what quality of cement you will put, I don't know. So I will buy cement and give it to you. So he will not buy the cement. Cement value he will reduce. I will pay for the cement and give it to him. Now that value also has to be added. Like how we had seen, there could be a loss of revenue to the government. So that value, what of cement, what I am buying has to be included. So the more the TDS deducted is good or less TDS is good for credit of GST. TDS more or less deduction doesn't matter, Preeti, because TDS is deducted by your customer and he will pay it to the government. So that is a income tax effect, does not have any effect under GST. Okay. Then the third aspect is in case of incidental expenses, which is including commission and packaging, which is charged by the supplier to the recipient. So any incidental expenses I incur for that supply has to be added. What are that? Freight handling charges, inspection or certification charges, installation and testing charges. Other examples could be in case of goods, weighment charges, loading charges, designing charges, all of that has to get added. So anything which I do for the customer, it has to get added. Comes under composite supply. Yes, it is all part of composite supply. Correct, sir. So these things has to be added. Then any interest or late fees. Okay. Any interest or late fees or penalty for delayed payment of any consideration for any supply. Interest or late fees or penalty for delayed payment of consideration for any supply has to get added. The time of supply for such interest would be the actual receipt. We have seen under time of supply, right? That in case of IPL, it will be added, but the payment will not be the date of invoice. It will be when you actually receive it. All other supply, we will decide that, okay, invoice date is relevant, but for IPL, we will see the actual receipt. If you have received it, only then you will pay the taxes. Now, such charges are in addition to the value of supply, hence, same rate of tax of the principal supply is applicable. Okay. So, generally, interest will be at a different rate because they are generally at general rate of 18%. Now, the value of the goods what you supply will be at, say, 5%. So, in that case, what will be the GST rate is the question. So, you are selling steel. Steel is for 1 lakh rupees. Okay. Your GST rate on steel is at 5%. Okay. So when you sell steel for 1 lakh rupees, what will be the CGST? CGST will be 1 lakh into 2.5%. When I say GST at 5%, 2.5% CGST, 2.5% SGST. So CGST is 2,500, SGST is 2,500. Correct. Now, this person whom you supplied, he did not pay you on time. So you charged. So this is invoice. In the invoice, will you charge interest, penalty, or late fees? You will not charge. Why you will not charge interest in the invoice itself? Correct. It is to tolerate or refrain to do an act, and that is a supply of service. So it has to be included then because it is so very evident that when you are collecting interest, it is the supply then. Why should you not add then? Correct. See, Kasak also is saying that interest is added to the transaction value and then GST is charged on the total amount. Okay, the correct answer is coming from Mahi, where it's saying that, okay, at the time of issue of invoice, you do not know whether that customer will default. So how will you add interest there? You will not add, correct? But then this provision, you're right, Mahi and Hardik, you're also saying that we are not known, correct? That whether they will pay on time or late. So you cannot charge interest at that time itself. Yes, Abhishek, because there is no evidence of delayed payment at the time of invoice. So we are not adding. Now, this 15(2)(d) clause is saying that, boss, add interest or late fees. So how will I add then? What you're saying also is right. Now, section also cannot be wrong. Section also is saying that, yes, please add it. So how will you add then? Correct. We will issue a debit note because no reissue invoice nahi hoga na, because invoice you have already raised, you have already reported, that is frozen. You cannot issue that invoice with corrections. That is not permitted. But where invoice is issued late by the supplier, no Pallavi, issue invoice is not issued late by the supplier. Invoice is issued by the supplier on time. Payment by the customer is made later on. Payment by the receiver is made later on. There it will not be possible for me. Correct? So I cannot raise a revised invoice or something. So what I will do, I will raise a debit note. So debit note for 5,000 rupees I have to raise. So I will raise 5,000 rupees. Now GST for general services, which is not specifically covered, is at 18%. So when I raise this debit note, what should be the CGST percentage and what should be the SGST percentage? And then we will multiply it. 9%, 9%. Okay. In previous chapter, we studied that the date of invoice, issue of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier. So invoice should be issued late. No, no, Pallavi. I'm sorry. There is a total misunderstanding here. So in the previous chapter, we studied that what is the time of supply. The time of supply is issue of invoice or receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Correct? And in case of supply of goods, receipt of payment is not there. So issue of invoice is the time of supply. So when you issue the invoice, that is the time of supply. Okay. So when you issue the invoice, that time itself you have to charge the GST. It's not that you have to delay the invoice. You have to issue the invoice on time itself. Okay. So most of you are saying that it should be 9%. No, it should not be 9%. This provision says that such charges, when are in addition to the value of supply, same rate of tax of the principal supply has to be applied. So what is the rate of tax on the principal supply? It is 2.5%. So you have to charge on 5,000 rupees, 2.5%. 12.5 rupees CGST, and this also at 2.5%, you will charge rupees 12.5. So you will not charge at general rate. What is the rate? That is how somebody, Sai Kiran was also correctly referring. This is a composite supply. What is the rate on the principal supply? That will apply to the debit note also. So you have to charge at 2.5%. Very important. Don't charge at 18%. Yeah, 125, sorry. Okay. So that is what B is saying, that interest and late fee. But the payment of this, when will you make? When you receive this money from the customer for this debit note. Clear hai yahan tak? And the last inclusion is subsidies linked. So that is a little detailed one. We'll take it up in the next session then. Okay. So we'll take the other one and then we'll close the value of supply. We'll take the MCQs and Then we will proceed with the next chapter in the next class itself. Neeru, please come in the next class on time so that I can explain it to you in Hindi and then proceed further. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.